Okay, so I'm going to take some mid-chapter review up for Unit 4 here. And it can be found on page 239. And there's some good questions on page 239, so I'm going to take up some of those. The first question I'm going to take up is actually question number 4. Okay, and you can turn to question number 4. And question number 4 asks, what restrictions are there on the value of x in x to the power of a negative a half? What are the restrictions? Okay, so what are the restrictions on that, x to the power of negative a half? And are these restrictions the same as the restrictions for, and I'll write this out again, is it the same as the restrictions for x to the power of positive half? And explain. So let's take a look at the restrictions. The first one I'm going to look at is this one here, because this one's a little easier actually. So what does x to the power of a half mean? Well, x to the power of a half, if you know anything about exponent rules, if you have to the power of a half, that actually just means the square root of x. That's what x to the power of a half means. Remember, you won't have to write the 2 out here, but that's what x to the power of a half means. So what are the restrictions to this problem? What are the restrictions on x? Well, if you think about it, x can be any number, really, but it can't be a negative number. So those are the restrictions on x. X cannot be any negative number because you cannot take the square root of a negative number. So x cannot equal any negative number. It could equal 0, because you could take the square root of 0. The square root of 0 is just 0. Okay? So you could definitely have, the square root of 0. You can do the square root of 1, the square root of 2, the square root of 3. You could even take the square root of 3.7 if you wish. These are all okay. All of these are okay. But you cannot take the square root of negative 4 or negative 5 or negative 7.2. You cannot take the square root of that or that or that. It's impossible to take the square root of a negative number. 0 is okay because you can take the square root of 0 is just 0 and every number above that. So that's okay. The restrictions on x therefore are x cannot be any negative number. Okay? Now if we take a look at this one, are the restrictions the same or different? Now let's look at what this means. Now when you have, there's two things going on here. Not only do you have to the power of half, you also have to the power of a negative. Now the first thing I'm going to apply is my negative exponent rule. What does my negative exponent rule mean? It means that x to the power of negative anything, okay, x to the power of negative half means 1 over x to the power of positive a half. That's what negative a half means. X to the exponent positive a half. You only flip this fraction, x over 1, not that fraction. So it's just 1 over x to the power of a positive a half. And then if you continue this, this is 1 over, and x to the power of a half on the bottom means the square root of x. So this is what that means. Now what are the restrictions over here? Well, again, obviously, x cannot equal negative numbers. The same rule as over here, because x can't be negative. If you take the square root of a negative number, it doesn't make sense, so you obviously can't take the square root of a negative. However, there is also another restriction, because we also know that this is on the bottom of a fraction. It's the denominator. Okay? And when you have a denominator, you know that the denominator cannot equal 0. Okay? So the denominator cannot equal 0 as well. So that means that this square root of x, that cannot equal 0 because you'll have 1 divided by 0 from unit number 2. So that just means if I square both sides here to get rid of the square root, that's the opposite of square root, that means x cannot equal 0 squared is 0. I actually have two restrictions. I have x cannot equal any negative number, but also x cannot equal 0. That's what's different from here to here. Over here, it's okay if x is 0. We all know why x can't be negative here and here, because you can't take the square root of negative numbers. However, x can be 0 over here because you can take the square root of 0, and that's okay. Square root of 0 is 0, you're okay. But over here, you cannot have x equals 0, because if you put 0 here, the square root of 0, yes, is 0, but you'll have 1 divided by 0, which is a restriction. You can never have the denominator of a fraction equal to 0 because it's undefined at x equals 0. So this actually has two restrictions. One of the restrictions is different from the restriction of x to the power of a half. So that was question number 4. Very good question there. And let's take care of a couple other questions. So, I don't know, I'm going to take care of question 9. So we're going to look at question number 9. And I'm going to take a look at question 9, let's say C. And question 9C has this written down. It has big brackets to the power of -2. And then it has y squared to the power of 6. And under here it has y to the power of 9. Okay, so I wouldn't go too crazy and start, flipping things and do this, do that, do the other thing all at the same time. I would just relax and go through the motions here. And I'm going to take care of what's inside these brackets first. I'm not even going to care about this -2. I'm just going to actually continue this problem with the -2 always here. I'm going to take care of what's inside here. So what's inside here, I first have to take care of the power of a power inside. Okay, so I'm going to leave the y to the power of 9 here. But this is y to the power of 2 to the power of 6. So that is the same as y to the power of 12, because the power of a power, you multiply the exponents, keep the base the same. Continuing this, again, I am not going to worry about this. I'm going to do y to the power of 12 divided by y to the power of 9 inside of the brackets. So y to the power of 12 divided by y to the power of 9, the rule is keep the base the same and subtract the exponents in order. 12 minus 9 is 3. Then continuing this, now this is y to the 3 to the -2. So again, what's the rule here? That's a power of a power. So this is y to the power of 3 times -2 is -6. Now, that's much easier that I do it this way. So now at the very end, this is my final answer, but I can never have a final answer with a negative exponent. So I'm going to rewrite this as the real answer. What does negative exponent mean? It means 1 over y to the positive 6. And so this is my final answer. Okay? So I'll take care of all my rules first. At the end, take care of a negative exponent. Make it easier on myself. Let's take a look at 9f as well. And 9f has 4r to the -6 times -2 r squared to positive 5 all over it is -2 r to the power of 4. Now again, a lot of people just start doing things, okay? So don't just start doing things, start looking at what you have to take care of first. So the way I see it is I can't multiply this by this yet because I have this attached to another exponent, so I have to do the power of a power first. Same with the bottom. So I'm going to leave this 4r to the power of -6. Notice I'm not changing that to be 1 over r and all that stuff. Who cares about the negative exponents until the very end? But be careful here. This 5 applies to both these things. This is -2 to the power of 5 and r squared to the power of 5, which is r to the power of 10. Because r to the power of 2 to the power of 5 is the power of power. 2 times 5 is 10. And you have to remember that -2 also, the 5 applies to the -2. So it's equal to that. Continuing this, at the bottom, same rule here. That 4 applies to both things. So that's -2 to the power of 4 and r to the power of 4. Okay? So that's both things there as well. That 4 applies to both things. Continuing this, now I'm going to write this as 4r to the power of -6. And then I'm going to just take care of this. -2 to the power of 5 means -2 times itself 5 times. -2 times -2 times -5 times is -32. R to the power of 10. And this is all over -2 to the power of 4 is -2 times itself 4 times. So negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 16 r to the power 4. Okay? And continuing this, now I can start doing my multiplication. I can start doing this times this. Okay? So when you're doing that, just remember that you multiply the bases that are the same. Well, the 4 times the negative 32 is negative 128. Okay? But the r to the power of 6 times r to the power of 10 is going to be, keep the base as r, add the exponents, negative 6 plus 10 is 4. Okay? So the exponents ended up being a positive exponent. And then on the bottom you still have 16 r to the power of 4. Okay? Continuing this, I have 128 r to the power of 4 all over 16 r to the power of 4. So I'm going to do negative 128 over 16 if that's reducible. And if I do 128 divided by 16, it actually ends up being a whole number. It's 8. And r to the power of 4 divided by r to the power of 4 is r to the power of 4 minus 4 is 0. So all that means is that's 8 times r to the power of 0 is 1. So 8 times 1 is 8. Anything to the power of 0 is 1. Remember, exponent rule. Keep the base the same, subtract the exponents. 4 minus 4 is not 1, it's 0. Okay? You're not dividing 4 by 4, you are subtracting the division rule. Okay, so it ends up being 8. Okay, so even though there was r's in here, notice that it ends up being a whole number. So I wouldn't go starting to mess around with negatives and positives and all this stuff. I would just use my exponent rules and see what I end up with.